theme that unites all our talks today is a common interest in multimodal literacies and something called governmentality. I'll introduce the idea of governmentality along with multimodal literacies, and then I'll focus on the heart of my talk, which is how to think theoretically about agency in the shadow of governmentality. In today's world, educational assessments are often tools for policy and regulation. Foucault might say they're used to govern individuals. Well, what's meant by this? Take the case of large-scale assessments. Their results are represented by numbers and rankings. These rankings govern individuals or countries by naming them as average, below average, failing, or passing, and so on. Such namings often aren't embedded in a discussion of socio-political and economic factors, and the tests by design are only a sample of the area being assessed. They can't represent the complete picture. The result is, as Ian Hacking suggests, the making up of people, which inevitably leads to restrictions on how people think of themselves and what they can become. Nevertheless, societies and governments use assessments for political and policy ends. Foucault is particularly taken with the examination. He argues that it combines the techniques of an observing hierarchy, the government, and those of a normalizing judgment, the rankings. Our age of big data seems to have created a stock market like education, where efforts are not contextualized and educational assessment seems to be a driver in this market economy approach to education. An example that many of you know is the rankings produced by PISA. Finland, which is a leader in this PISA stock market, has become a site of educational pilgrimage, so that other countries scramble to see if they can pay out similar dividends. So let's think about assessments. Assessments are shared systems of values. When we assess, we're saying that some action or artifact is of greater value than some other action or artifact. Multimodal literacy assessment offers us a double values moment because we are making value statements both about assessment and about the nature of literacy itself. Multimodal literacies open up the view of literacy to include meaning-making actions and artifacts such as movements, film, printed words, still images, sounds,
space, but as far as I knew, there
and much, much more. Multimodal literacies go beyond the print-centric, and they interact with each other. Multimodal literacies are often associated with technology because technology makes these ways of making meaning more accessible and easier often. But, as this 20-year-old writing sample from a 6-year-old illustrates, we have long been using whatever resources we have on hand to make meaning. It's just taken literacy theory a while to catch up. And of course, now assessment must catch up as well. How can assessment catch up? By being framed in terms of agency rather than governmentality. The work of the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, while oriented towards the idea of political responsibility, offers not only a way of thinking about agency, but one that has surprising resonance with multimodal literacy. The key principles that are shared in common are potentiality, plurality, unpredictability, and unconventionality. I will also draw from work that focuses on how we responsibly work with knowledge to capture how we can know well and do well in multimodal literacy assessment. So let's look at potentiality. Arendt argues that our natality, our being born into the world, offers a new beginning for the world because the newcomer possesses the capacity of beginning something anew, that is, of acting. She doesn't give in to the doom of governmentality, but invests hope in each of us, in our potential, even though she realizes that when we enter the world, we become a part of the human condition, where the world's reality is felt and received as a conditioning force. This theme of potential runs through much of the writing on multimodal texts. Halliday's idea of the meaning potential of signs focuses on what users of a language are able to do with language, how they use language to mean. Multimodal literacies extend Halliday's idea across the spectrum of modalities used to represent ideas in a user-centric view of literacy. What implications does potentiality have for assessment? Here are three possibilities. The architecture or structure of the assessment must be open to potential. For example, in a multiple choice structured assessment, instead of an expectation of a single correct response, the assessment would be open to the idea of multiple defensible responses. The idea of potentiality also means we need to be open to the inventiveness of the young. For example, when Yetta Goodman tells a story about a child who invented a new punctuation mark, the sallamation point, to express sorrow at the end of a story about the death of a family pet, that should be seen for what it is, creative invention that fits a particular context. Finally, this idea of potential applies to the act of assessment itself. Assessment professionals are merely people engaged in a reading of the meaning potential realized by others. Therefore, these assessment professionals, too, must consider in turn that they have to provide argumentation in defense of their readings and that their readings are contestable. Plurality. Agency in life and assessment depends on plurality. Essentially, plurality is that delicate relation of equality and distinction. But for Arendt, the nature of the relation is what is important. Rather than defining us ahead of time, plurality affords us what she calls a space of appearance, where people, like this child highlighted, can speak and act together with others to make known to others who they are rather than what they are, as would be the case in many contemporary assessment systems. Similarly, multimodal literacy embraces a pluralistic view in that meaning occurs in relation to social action. Multi-authoring, as one might see in a wiki or a dramatic production, is seen as conventional, and the individual representations of meaning that are made are considered in relation to the social. So there is always this equality and distinction relation. In assessment, plurality means finding the individual within the social, but not in the normative sense of categorizing, ranking, and labeling. Rather, it demands our understanding of the specificity of the social. So, for example, it would mean understanding how the context of a book report performed as Franny K. Stein, the lead character in the Franny K. Stein series of children's books, opens up interpretation of the text while recognizing that all interpretations, regardless of modalities, are but interpretations of the original text. It means understanding that the context of a university science competition, which is represented by nicely organized poster boards, minimizes the complexities of the science and the long and sometimes confusing hours underlying the doing of the science. It means understanding the context of an orchestral performance where the instruments speak with individual voices and a collective voice which somehow differs from orchestra to orchestra. Such representational and interpretive forays offer us the opportunity to see the complexities of plurality, of the relation of individuals to collectives and collectives to each other. If assessments are to allow room for the appreciation of the individual and the social, then they have to be more flexible and elastic, recognizing the new, but nesting that recognition in a critical appreciation of the past. They have to be flexible in terms of the modes of the creation of meaning that are open to individuals, and elastic in terms of understanding the breadth of meanings possible. Only in this way will the potential engagements with texts be realized, and more importantly, in assessment terms, be recognized. Having agency means as well that when we act, we must be open to the unpredictable and the unconventional, We can't predict what will happen. From Arendt's perspective, to engage or to act is to take a chance on the unpredictability of action. Just as this child is taking a chance on speaking in this public space, it is a sharing of a common world with others who look at it from different perspectives. Because multimodal literacies emphasize language and use, they too are open to the unpredictable or unconventional. Language in use is language that is evolving. That language does not exist in isolation as a single sign, such as an image, sound, or word, but rather there's an interplay of modalities, the processes used in creating language, the product of expression, and the context in which that expression occurs. As the photo example shows, this context is a public space made up of children with an adult. That public space makes some meanings more possible than others. The microphone held by the child also means that this space requires a certain type of commentary. Yet you can see from the body positionings that this is a casual event. All of these elements and more work together to create the conditions both for the nature of expression and the interpretation of that expression. For multimodal literacy, the implications of unpredictability and unconventionality mean, as Jewett suggests, a recognition of the multiple interactions between the semiotic resources, sound, movement, image, and so on, the possibilities afforded, both positive and negative, by the nature of these resources, the cultural reference being drawn upon, and the organizing principles behind any multimodal expression, which inevitably sets out the expectation for newness. However, as the new becomes accepted, it becomes conventional, and in turn is unmade by another newness. All of our experiences with mobile technologies offer good illustrations of these processes. Assessment-wise, one of the biggest implications of adding a new semiotic element, such as a visual image, to written text, is not that the meaning-making is easier, but it gets harder and more demanding as more ways of meaning open up. So, with these elements in mind, I want to come full circle back to the idea that assessments are really representations of arguments about values. With multimodal literacies, there is a dynamic meaning-making and interpretation. An ethical stance in this regard is that meaning makers and interpreters should be afforded the opportunity to defend their positions rather than be locked into a singular way of representing ideas or of interpreting them. Those engaged in acts of assessment must provide warrants, arguments, and evidence to support their interpretations of meaning-making efforts. These arguments and efforts should be guided by a set of reasonable understanding. Single assessments shouldn't have extraordinary consequences. Assessments by themselves, by the way they are designed, can showcase some aspects of literacy learning while limiting others. And assessors have to be mindful of their own self-interest in assessment, something we don't talk about often. Here I'm thinking of self-interest ranging from anything like the positions one holds with respect to what method of assessment is used, to the desire for one's teaching efforts to be echoed in the meaning-making efforts of students. And finally, assessors need to be open to the fact that any individual assessment is only one way of interpreting and representing knowledge. If we can harness these principles of potentiality, plurality, and openness to the unpredictable and unconventional, I think we can do well in assessing multimodal literacies. Thank you. And here are the list of references that I used to create this slide and the chapter in the book on governmentality that this presentation is based on. Thank you very much.